I want help, and I am getting really good at asking for it because I do so
Yes.
much for other people. And like,
Yes.
I can have like 20 balls in the air and we're good. But then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
actually, I don't want to have 20 balls in the air. I would like you to take a couple, you take a couple, we're good. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer ashamed of like really just like
Right.
asking for help. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
I
think the
think,
truth is that
yeah,
people want to step up for us, right? Like,
of
especially
course
when
they
you have been
do.
the one who's been there for a bunch of people, like, people want to have the opportunity to pay that back. But again, so many of us kind of get in our own way and kind of build these stories around ourselves where we don't even want to ask for it. So I think it is actually a very loving act to allow people to show up for you in the same way as you've shown up for them.
Our wonderful listeners and community, I am so excited to be joined by Dr. Joy Harden Bradford today for our conversation about community and sisterhood on Let's Talk Love. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Joy.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin. It's a pleasure.
It really, really is. I listened to your book, Sisterhood Heals, The Transformative Power of Healing in Community, this week. And I loved your book, Dr. Joy. I think the work you're doing to help Black women, Black girls, and building community amongst women is powerful, important work. And talking about the healing aspect of that, my best friends, I've got actually quite a few best friends that work with
Okay.
us on our team at Real Love Ready, which is incredible. So we know the power of friendship and community. And this is the very first time that we on this show, like I think, I actually don't know the number right now. I think we're up to 80 episodes, but we have never had a guest on to talk about friendship and sisterhood and healing
Mm.
in that aspect. We talk a lot about intimate relationships, but we really don't talk about friendship. So this is
Mm-hmm.
exciting, Dr. Joy.
Very exciting. I'm very happy to be here to talk about this for the first time. But Robin, I really appreciate you creating space for this conversation because I think that's a part of what I talk about in the book, right? Is this idea
Yep.
that when we think about love, when we think about intimacy, so much of it is focused on romantic relationships, right? But our friendships and the relationships we have with the women in our life are also incredibly intimate. In some ways, maybe even more intimate than those with a romantic partner, right? And so I really appreciate you creating space to have this conversation.
So I know that you are a licensed psychologist. You've got your master's in counseling, and you got a breadth of work in helping in this aspect. So can you tell us about your background, please, Dr. Joy?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've created this online space where you're helping women with accessing therapy. So please, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you
Yeah.
and actually also what led you to write this book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I have a master's in vocational rehabilitation and counseling, and then I have a PhD in counseling psychology. And as a part of the PhD program, we were required to do an internship. And I did mine at Virginia Commonwealth University and in the counseling center there, and had the opportunity to learn how to do therapy groups, interpersonal process therapy groups. And I really feel like I just fell in love with that modality. There was something that was so incredibly powerful about the transformation that you saw happen in a group that was very, very different than I saw like in individual work because we were doing both at the same time, right? And so I think that group just became a real love and a passion for me. And so I really wanted to be able to use what I've learned in group and talk about it in the book, in Sisterhood Heals. And so talking a lot about how our friendship groups and how our sisterhoods really mimic sometimes what we see in group therapy. A lot of my background is also in college student mental health. And my favorite part of that work
Mm.
was always outreach presentations. So where we would go out to the sorority meetings and to the residence halls to have presentations about mental health. And I really see therapy for Black girls as a continuation and an extension of that work. The podcast, I think, is like a new outreach opportunity for me where I'm reaching people wherever they are, talking about different kinds of mental health topics.
How important is that, right? So how would you define sisterhood?
Sisterhood, I think, is the family we choose for ourselves, right? So there's the family we're born into, but I think sisterhood are those women that we surround ourselves, that we are accountable to, that are accountable to us, who really kind of help to pick us up and support us throughout life.
Right. And so you talk about, you share, of course, about yourself in your book and your story of how when you were little, you would be on the porch with your family members, right? Your aunts and your mom and watching that dynamic and how that really helped shape how you see how important community is. Can you talk about that and how
Yeah,
like
so
just the modeling that you grew up with?
as you mentioned that, Robin, I'm like instantly transported to my grandmother's front porch because I spent so much time there. So
Yeah.
my mom actually has 6 sisters, and I have probably 30 first cousins that are girls. And so there's just a lot of women in my family. And so
Hmm.
holidays and time spent there were always really special and magical. And I feel like I always just felt so loved and supported by the women in my family, the men too, but I think a special kind of relationship with the women in my family and the relationships I saw between my mom and her sisters. And I think that just kind of people watching and kind of paying attention to what was going on really just kind of gave me a thirst and a quest for human behavior and like why we do the things that we do. But I think, kind of going back to the ideas around how our ideas about relationships with other women are shaped by the early experiences we have. I think if you see your mom and grandmother and aunts and people have good relationships with other women, I think it is more likely that you then mimic that in your own life, right? And I think for a lot of us, there has been messaging and like ideas that we've been taught by the women in our family about being really weary of other women in our lives, right? Like that you can't trust women, that there's all this catfighting, and that you can't get
Mm.
too close to other women. But I think when you've seen healthy relationships and seen your mom and aunts and grandmothers have healthy female friendships, then you are more likely to seek that out for yourself as well.
I agree with that, Dr. Joy. I mean, I grew up with the same modeling around. My mom had good friends. My family, the women in my family, very supportive and loving and caring, and sit down and just talk about absolutely anything and everything. There was no holds
Uh-huh.
barred. But something that I learned so much from reading your book, and especially around Black women culture. I mean, obviously, I'm Caucasian white women. That doesn't. I really. It was so. Your book was so informative. So thank you so much. But I was surprised to hear that in as a Black girl growing up, you said in the culture of you said there you were actually, like you just said, you were raised to think, like, be careful of those girls at
Mm-hmm.
school, right? Even from a
Yes.
young age. And so where do you think that is? Whereas you said right now that you grew up with a very supportive, like, sister circle that you were modeled. So that seems to be a juxtaposition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was it like, okay, you could trust your family, you could trust the women in your family, but don't trust stranger girls at school? Like, how does that? Can
Exactly.
you just talk a little bit more about
Exactly.
that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that kind of comes from this scarcity mindset that unfortunately has been a part of Black culture, kind of dating back to slavery, right? Like this idea that we are kind of needing to be leery of one another and like only one of us can
Mm.
succeed, right? So who was in the
Right.
plantation house and who was on the field? Like a lot of it kind of I think
Mm.
spawns from there. And so this
Mm.
idea that yes, you could trust family. Like I never was taught anything about like not trusting family members,
Mm.
but there were conversations around like not being too close to other people. Don't tell people too much of your business because you never know how they're going to use it against you. And I think a lot of
Uh-huh.
that again comes from this idea that you don't want to have somebody else succeed and then you can't go after the things that you want to do. Now, I'm glad that no more of us are having different kinds of conversations with the young women in our lives. And I don't feel like I hear that as much, but I'm
Mm.
not the only one. In doing the focus
Right.
groups I did for the book, many Black women had that same kind of story that they were taught to be a little more cautious about other girls in their lives and, to kind of hold people at an arm's length.
Right. So this was another. I wrote down this quote, or just around the fact that talking about how our friendships really help with our physical and mental health. But then you talk about loneliness, right? You said the loneliness index reported that 61% of Americans shared feeling lonely. That same year, a study of 2,000 Americans commissioned by Evite found that the average American hadn't made a new friend in the past 5 years. And I was like, holy crap. like, so this is my best friend and I who work on the podcast together. And I was like looking on my, like counting on my hand, my new friends in the last 5 years. And I'm like, I was naming like really close people in my life that just came into my life in 5 years. And that's pretty awesome. But also like to think that that's not common. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, were you shocked to read that? Because I'm thinking even my partner that I'm with, like I love him so much. He's impacted my life so greatly. I met we've been together almost now 8 months. Like doesn't seem like a long time, but and then I think about my other best friend and this best friend. I'm like, we met in the last 5 years, and like what a great like huge improvement that they've brought into my life.
Yeah, I think I was both shocked and not shocked to read that, Robin. Because I think about like how busy most of us are, right? I think, when people are going to work and then going to, after school activities, maybe for their children, and then like you got to get home and get dinner on the table, and then like you sleep for a few hours and you start it all over again, right? Like when are people actually having the time to connect with new people? Now, I think that there are opportunities to meet other people in some of those settings, but I think for most people, they are kind of like in a routine of like kind of just trying to get through the day and through the week. And so there isn't a lot of time, right? Like you hear all this conversation about the lack of third spaces, right? And like that we don't have these places to kind of casually hang out anymore. And so I'm not surprised that more people are not like finding new friends to connect with.
Right. I hope everybody reads your book, Dr. Joy, because it's just so full of tools, really information and tools for having deeper intimacy with your friendships. Because really, I know in my own life, I've got 9 best friends that I grew up with, and I know that's not common. It is so rare. Like there's 10 of us and we are close. Like it's not just there's 10 of us and we just go like girls trips. No. It's not like that at all. It's more like we are sisters, and like to the bit, like we are like very, very close. But I understand that that's a rarity. So what are the 4 S's of sisterhood?
So sisterhood allows us to be seen. So there is a way that I think Black women see one another that really allows you to feel not invisible as many of us do, I think, in other spaces in our lives. So it allows us to be seen. It allows us to be supported and to support one another. It allows us to soften. So in conversations for the book, there was a lot of, talk about like having to kind of put this armor on before you go into a workplace or before you go into a particular kind of setting. And then when you're with other Black women, you don't have to, kind of feel that. And then sisterhood also allows us to have greater knowledge of ourselves. And so I think that there are some things that we just do not and cannot know about ourselves until we are in relationship with other people. And so having these intimate, close relationships with other women really allow you to have a greater knowledge of yourself.
Right. And you talk about guidelines in sisterhood, right? And so is this from your model of doing group therapy? Like Dr. Joy, for those of the listeners that haven't read your book yet and aren't really familiar with your work of organizing group therapy, like what would be like, how does it work? Like with for instance, like guidelines that people that you absolutely recommend like to follow.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for you to have a genuine curiosity about other people. I think so many times when like we get into a conversation, it can feel judgy, right? Which never feels good, right? But I think when people approach us with a spirit of curiosity, I think it is a very different kind of conversation, and you're actually inviting a conversation as opposed to like one-word answers. So I think that that's really important, is that we approach conversations with a spirit of curiosity. I also think it's really important to have no distractions in your space, right? So again, many of us are so busy, we trying to multitask and like, okay, let me squeeze in this conversation with my girlfriend. But if you really want to kind of create space for somebody and hold space for somebody, then I think it's really important that you kind of be away from your phone. You're not trying to tend to other kinds of things at the same time. And I also think it's really important for you to make sure that you actually have adequate space to be able to manage anything that they may be talking about, right? So a part of what we learn as therapists is that there may be particular kinds of cases that you cannot take because it's too close to maybe something going on in your own life. So the example that we use pretty often is, if you are going through a recent divorce, are you able to effectively help another couple who is having marriage or relationship problems, right? And sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is that it's too close, right? And your objectivity is compromised. And so maybe you need to step away from those kinds of cases, for the time being. And I think that the same thing happens with our own friendships, right? Like if a friend is struggling with relationship concerns and we are also struggling with relationship concerns, are you actually in a good place to be able to hold space for this person to be able to not muddy your stuff with their stuff so that you're not objectively listening to them?
And so let's talk about holding space, because I just think there's a lot around this concept. Like, what does it mean to clearly hold, like to hold space for someone?
Yeah, and I think that that's a term that kind of has been thrown around a lot, Robin. And,
I
I
think so
don't know that
too.
people, don't know that people always know what it means, but it is
Right. And
really kind
how?
of,
Yeah.
it's kind of figuratively creating a container for somebody to deposit what they are struggling with or some experience that they are feeling. And so that does look like being non-judgmental. That looks like listening more than you are talking. That looks like really just kind of sitting with someone in the depths of whatever it is that they are struggling with. And so it doesn't always look like you having to have the answers. In fact, most often you won't have answers if you're just holding space for someone, but it really is just like the sitting alongside someone when they are really struggling with something.
Yes. Something that, so this was at least about 11 or 12 years ago. I joined a group our group is called Soul Circle. There's 4 women. We come together every 2 weeks for an hour in the morning from 7 to 8 a.m., right?
Uh-huh.
And our ritual is that we only have an hour, but we make sure that we divvy up the time and we hold space for each other. We each have our 11 minutes, let's say, and somebody's the timer, and we go through and share whatever we want to. And then after our 11 minutes is up, the other 3, after witnessing, listening, holding space, can ask for consent. Like, would you like me to say, would you like feedback? Right? It's like the most loving container. I'm telling you, it's been transformative. And I
How
think
did this
anybody
group
can
come
do.
together, Robin?
So originally it was through a business mastermind idea.
Okay.
Most of us had taken B school and
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk about our businesses, the Marie Forleo B School.
Right.
And then over time, we realized that our group was just talking way more about our personal stuff. Like that's what we needed in our group. And now, I mean, we've lost a few members, but all for the right reasons. I just think it's like what's meant to be is meant to be. And our group is so sacred. And now it's like the 4 of us that are still there, every 2 weeks. And it doesn't take a lot of time. I think that's the other thing, Joy, is that, it is incredible what this group has really brought to my life. And I know we all feel the same way, but it's 1 hour every 2 weeks. I mean, you think about it, but then we support each other. Of course, we're friends. We're really, really close friends now. So it's not like we don't connect outside of that.
Right.
But I think there's just so much beauty in the holding space part. Right.
Yeah. And I think that there's something really special about like the intentionality of having this protected time on your calendar, right? Because I think that this is where a lot of the intimacy is lost in friendships, is that it feels like, oh, I've known them for so long, and so we can kind of just catch up whenever. But a lot of us know that if it's not on the calendar, it's probably not happening. And so I think having that very clear time that is protected, you're not scheduling anything else there. You're probably trying not to miss it if at all possible. I think that there's something that's really powerful about the intention set behind that and everybody kind of protecting that time and space with one another.
So what about vulnerability? And so how are you counseling, coaching, guiding people to open up to being how important vulnerability is? Can we please talk about that, Dr. Joy? And then how are you leading women to become more vulnerable so that they can build more intimacy in these connections?
Yeah, I think vulnerability is really, really difficult because I think especially for Black women, right? Like so many of us have been socialized and taught to have this like strong exterior, like you got to be there for everybody. You can't show weakness, like that is, asking for help is a sign of weakness kind of thing. And so I think even when you want to be vulnerable, it takes a lot. And there's a lot of kind of unlearning and rewiring that has to be done for you to actually allow somebody to see who you are, because I think so many of us just don't want to acknowledge that we have flaws. that we're not perfect, that there are things wrong in our lives. And so I think it is only in safe spaces, right? Like spaces where you don't feel like people will judge you or think that you're weird for having some kind of issue. Those are the spaces where you can kind of take those masks off. You can take some of those layers of armor off and really allow people to see you. And I think one of the things that I am most often working with clients and just greater conversations in the Therapy for Black Girls community is about doing more, asking for help. I think that so many of us are the strong friend. We are the reliable, responsible person in so many other people's lives. Like, we are the one that everybody is coming to, but we don't typically have those people in our lives who we are going to. But that doesn't mean that those people don't exist. I think many of us just don't take the opportunity to even ask for help because we are seen as the one who is the responsible one. And so I talk a lot about allowing people to show up for you in the same ways that you show up for so many other people. And I think it is just a muscle that we have to practice, right? It's just like any other skill that you learn is doing more, asking for help.
Dr. Joy, that is so great. I love that. It is a muscle. There's a belief system around that. Like, I can do this, I'm capable, but no, like, it's just like, that's enough. It's in the book, you talk about the paradox of the rock, right? And how it's like and I think like, I could see this in you, I could see it in me. And so many of the women I'm surrounded by, we are the rocks. Like, we are strong, independent, like, capable women. It's like,
right.
But guess what? I still am. I'm a softie on the inside. And I want help and I need help. I don't want to do it all.
Right. Yeah.
And
it is such a paradox, right?
Yeah.
Because you can. You probably can do a lot, but do you have to? Do you have to and do you want to? Yes.
And the older I get, like, we're close in age. Like, you and I are 2 years apart. The older I get, Joy, I'm like, I want help. And I am getting really good at asking for it because I do so much for other people. And like, I can have like 20 balls in the air and we're good. But then I'm like, actually, I don't want to have 20 balls in the air. I would like you to take a couple, you take a couple, we're good. And I'm no longer ashamed of like, really just like asking for help. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the truth is that people want to step up for us, right? Like, especially when you have been the one who's been there for a bunch of people, like, people want to have the opportunity to pay that back. But again, so many of us kind of get in our own way and kind of build these stories around ourselves where we don't even want to ask for it. So I think it is actually a very loving act to allow people to show up for you in the same ways you've shown up for them.
You give some great examples. I love this, okay? Because we are used to saying to somebody, like, let's say somebody is going through a time of grief or they're just having a hard, hey, who knows, whatever it is. It's just like, you can see that your sister needs some help, right? And they're going through, like, you want to be there for them. And too commonly, we'll be like, how can I help you? I'm here to help. How can I help? And you're like, that's not the right question. That's not the right approach because I don't even know where to start. Like, if I'm feeling overwhelmed and something's going, haywire in my life, I'm not even up to even answering that question because I'm just like, no, I can't give you any assistance on how to help me. So you give some really great examples of this in the book around like, I love that example you give on this woman who sent a text to her friend and said, I can't remember what it was that she was going through, but it was like, okay, number one, I can leave a meal on your doorstep and go away. Okay. Number two, I could pick up your kids from school and take them for ice cream. Number three, I can pray for you, which I am doing anyways, and then don't worry. And number four, none of the above. Like, I love you, Eddie. Like, you don't need to respond. Yeah. And I just like giving those very tangible ways that you can and you want to help, and then that person will have to say number two, please, and all of the above. It doesn't matter, but it's like, right?
Yeah, I think that that's so important to be able to give people tangible things that like you could offer them. Because we often, and I think it is well-meaning, like there are well-intentions, like, oh, let me know if you need anything, right? Like, I think many of us do want to be there if we know there's something we can do. But like you said, when people are overwhelmed, when they're grieving, when, they are struggling with their mental health, they often don't know where to start. Like, they often feel overwhelmed by just making another decision. And so if you know this person well enough to be able to kind of intuit, what might they need right now? So is it likely they're not kind of feeding themselves? Like, can you go do some grocery shopping? or can you send over, some of their food? If you know they are likely not like taking care of laundry and those kinds of things, can you offer to go over and wash a couple of loads of laundry or go and do some
Great
dishes, right? Like,
examples of something that would
yes,
help
very
so much.
tangible things. Exactly, exactly. And again, of course, this means that you have a close enough relationship where somebody would like let you into their house to do their laundry, right? But
Right.
but if you do,
But
then I
even
think
like, for instance, like, let's say you're not even that close to, let's just say you're
mm-hmm,
like, okay, I can come and help clean your house, or I can hire a cleaning company. My
yep,
cleaner, instead of cleaning my house this week, they'll come and clean your house. Like, that is like a
yes,
big, huge gift that is like,
yes,
right. I
mm-hmm.
really like those
Thinking about
examples.
things
I
you can
remember,
take off of the list for people.
right. I remember when my twin brother died, and you don't even know where to start. But one of my closest friends, like, what an angel on earth. And she says, she called me, and she said, Robin, can I help you pick the hymns for the service? I'm thinking, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even think about that. I mean, that's not on
Right,
my to-do list, but obviously it
right,
has to get done. And
right.
I was like, yes, like, what an incredible gift. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you think happened? She chose hymns that we grew up listening to in church. Like, it's just like, what are the chances? Well, I mean, that's a gift. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
was invaluable. But
Yeah.
I'll never forget about that very real, tangible example of something that just was like a weight lifted off, like amongst all that heaviness. So
Mm-hmm.
beyond doing group therapy, if people don't have access to this in their lives, or they just really don't have a sense of community or sisterhood in their lives. Like, how, in an everyday setting, like, how are you encouraging or tools that people can like take into their own lives to actually cultivate even just one new friendship or one new
Mm-hmm.
connection that would uh, bring that into their lives?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
ideas do you have for that, Dr. Joy?
So I think, Robin, that there are often people in the backgrounds of our lives who, with a little bit of effort, could move to the foreground, right? So maybe there
Yeah.
is a mom that you see in the carpool line and y'all kind of exchange pleasantries, but it doesn't go any further. Or maybe you sit next to somebody in your Pilates class and, again, you smile and say hi, but like after
Mm.
you're done, everybody goes back to their cars. What would it be like for you to say, hey, would you like to grab a smoothie after Pilates? Or, hey, would you like to get breakfast after we drop the kids off? And I think that that's hard for people because nobody wants to be rejected, right? Like, what if they say no? What if they think I'm weird? And all of that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the case of if there is no risk, there is no reward. And so,
Right.
kind of pulling up your big girl pants and just putting yourself out there and saying, hey, would you like to do this thing? And I think it's also really important to make sure that you keep your expectations realistic. So this could be
Mm.
somebody who becomes a lifelong friend, or it could just be a nice smoothie, right? And so just go
Right.
into it with being open and not expecting that this is going to be your new BFF.
I really like that. I'm talking to Kirsten, my best friend, about this. We're like, okay, we're talking about, okay, last 5 years, our new friends, right? And how did these come about? Because I
Uh-huh.
wanted to uncover that for her too. She lives in Scotland. I live in Victoria,
Okay.
BC. I mean, we're on different sides of the planet, but I'm just
Uh-huh.
like, okay, so how did that? And she was talking about how she used to go into this place where it was like house design place, and the
Mm.
owner of the store and her, because connected, and just like we're very, very friendly, and like just like she felt like good vibe, right, with this
Uh-huh.
woman. And maybe by the third or fourth time going in this store, she was like, do you want to go for a coffee one day? And the woman's like, yes. And now they meet almost on a weekly basis. They are
See.
just such good friends. So great example of like, this is somebody
Mm-hmm.
that you just like, that's an example, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Um, and I was thinking about when a women's store that I go to for my clothing, the owner, same. I mean, I just like fell in love with her from the beginning when I met her, and I said to her, I was like, Rebecca, can we please be friends? Like, what do I have to lose? I still love your clothes. If you say no, I'm still going to shop here. But anyway, and she was like,
Right.
yes, Robin, I really want to be your friend. And she and I are like really close friends.
See.
So what do you have to lose, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, you don't have anything to lose. You already didn't have this friendship. So if she says no, then you still don't have the friendship, right? And I think that there's
yeah,
a there's a saying that a lot of people use here, called shoot your shot, right? So it's the idea
shoot
that
your
like,
shot.
oh, I really like this person's vibe, like you mentioned, right? Like you sometimes can just tell, like, I think we would be really good friends, or at least enjoy each other's company, right? And so there's nothing wrong with shooting your shot in a friendship way. I think we think about it romantically, right? Like you see somebody that's attractive, you want to slide them your number, but you can
Mhm.
also do that with people that you think would be fun company, even platonically. And so I think more of
Right.
us should take those risks when we feel like there's somebody who has like a kindred spirit and somebody we would enjoy spending some time with, just letting them know and seeing if there's an opportunity to grow a friendship.
Right. And I also think, Dr. Joy, in your book, you just reinforce more around, and you just said it, around the fact that there could be even a friendship or somebody in the foreground that you can become closer to just by making the time, reaching out. And when you are with that person, it is with more intentionality, like you're like
Mm-hmm.
an acquaintance or even a friend that you want to be closer to. It's like holding space for that person, giving them your undivided attention, right? Just being more in service to that friendship,
Mm-hmm.
and right, and seeing how that can help you in return. I know that's how it
Exactly.
works,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
Where what how can people work more from you, work more with you, and learn more from you? Like, tell us what you're up to these days and
Yeah,
how people
yeah.
can
So
follow you. Yeah.
yeah, so as you mentioned, I would love for more people to read Sisterhood Heals because I think that they are very timely conversations. I think I again love that you have created space for this conversation, and I want more of us to really put more credence on the female friendships and the relationships that we have platonically with the women in our lives. So you can go to sisterhoodheals.com and learn more about the book. You can take a quiz to find out who you are in your friend circle, because I think that that's really
Oh,
important to think about the role that we play in our friend circle. So that I think is
yeah.
a fun opportunity. And then you can listen to more of the conversations that I mentioned before on the Therapy for Black Girls podcast. So if you go to therapyforblackgirls.com, you'll be able to listen to the podcast, but also we have a therapist directory for people who want to get connected to therapists in
Right.
their area. Though there are lots of opportunities to get connected on our website as well.
I think that's wonderful. I think that's also something you've really brought to your community, which is not that's a resource that so many people can tap into, is finding
Yes.
a therapist in their area. Because I mean, I love therapy, and if you can have access to it where you live, obviously that's that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Joy, for the tremendous work you're doing. I mean, it means a lot, and I loved your book, and thank you so much for your time today. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Robin. It
I
was fun to chat with you.
I always we always close our podcast with a blessing, and the blessing is based on your work and what I've learned from you this week. So may we heal together through our sisterhood. Our friendships give us a safe space to be seen, heard, and held. Not to mention so much joy. I've just had so much joy with my friendships, that's for sure. May we be more vulnerable with people we feel safe around. By sharing ourselves and the truths about who we are and our experiences, we can form authentic connections and cultivate new friendships. And may we use sisterhood to become the best possible versions of ourselves. And I think our friendships really enable us to do that, to grow and be the best versions of ourselves. So thank you, Dr. Joy.
Thank you, Robin. Beautiful blessing.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Let's Talk Love is brought to you by Real Love Ready and hosted by Robin Ducharme. If you'd like to keep learning with us, visit realloveready.com for more resources and tools to boost your relational skills and get better at love. If this podcast has resonated with you, it would mean the world to us if you could take just 30 seconds to do these 3 things. Follow or subscribe. Never miss an episode by hitting the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app. This makes sure new episodes show up automatically for you, and it helps us get more visibility so more people can find our show. Leave a rating and review. Your feedback means everything to us. By leaving a 5-star rating and a thoughtful review, you're not only showing your support, but also helping others discover the podcast. Share an episode that really spoke to you with someone in your life, whether it's a friend, partner, or family member. Your recommendation could just be what they need to hear. We at Real Love Ready acknowledge and express gratitude for the Coast Salish people, the stewards of the land on which we work and play, and encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge and express gratitude for those that have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you live on as well. Many blessings and much love.